A lot of your teaching, Alaya, from my experience, points to an importance of what is arising in this moment. And I wonder if I could take this opportunity to explore that with you, what that really means,
Mm.
and to have your support in that process of really aligning with what's happening in this very moment.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Thank you for your question. Um, what I usually folks come to me, they're having we can say the word suffering, but there's a whole bunch of energy that can be described inside of suffering, right? It can be the fundamental suffering when we experience in separation, right? Which is like a deep and profound suffering, right? That the other is over there and we're here, right? And there's this deeper knowing, this false sense here, direct experience that I also like to use the word yearning, right? That is just sort of alive inside of us, right? That's really, and in the world, we're trying to, in the experience of separation, we're trying to fill that, right? We're trying to heal that, feeling of disconnect from what's outside and inside, right? And those things are fundamentally temporary experiences that we're trying to bring love inside, and it's layered with condition, right? And we're bringing belief or conditions, right? And then as they come inside, we're relieved temporarily, right? But those are not the truth of what remains, of what that's fundamentally always here, right? So when we're having the suffering from the disconnect, this deep yearning, this felt sense that we're having in our body through the suffering, right? Or confusion in our mind. Like as we invite that in, right? There's something that's really different when it starts to arise within to maybe, there's a turning of our attention and of our energy. And we may be drawn to different situations like satsang, right? Like this is a very, this type of meeting where we're meeting and speaking about, what's really here, what's really arising in the moment, what's really going on. And that becomes, we're a moth to the flame if we're there's this fertile ground where we're really tired, where we really maybe we're becoming more and more ready and open to the tenderness, right? This kind of movement into the heart that's really is what's required to have this ending, right? Of like trying to bring things out and in for the connectedness, the wholeness, this deep yearning that we know it's not really the way it's supposed to be. Like we're not really functioning in our lives the way that we naturally, organically, we might not know it in our minds like that, those words and having it so clear, but the yearning speaks in a way that is so primordial and so much our foundation, right? We're just not happy, right? We're just not settled. We're just, we're always moving, we're grasping, we're trying, we're doing, we're filling, right? And we're redoing it again and again. And so that fertile ground I'm speaking of is sort of like the ending of that, and it's not necessarily a quick ending. It's sort of like a an unfolding in itself, that we're over and over in our lives softening to, saying, okay, this isn't working, right? There's like a surrender, right? And sometimes that can be through a lot of pain, and sometimes it can be through a lot of awareness. There's all different ways that we kind of start bowing to what's going on inside of us, and then as that begins, that turning within instead of grasping without, like that movement is the movement of what people call as awakening. And it's very mysterious. It can't be conducted or like the controlled or make happen, because really essentially when these things do or happen in your mind and you take those actions, it's what's prior that's actually fueling that curiosity or bringing you into that desire to make a shift for this way of external functioning to start becoming more an internal tending, right? And then this internal tending, right, this is a softening. There's something you can't like do the way we do in the external movement of life, of making it happen. It just won't work in internal, inside sensing, right? Just these words, tending and sensing, right? This is all a shift of energy that's softening and connecting to the heart. And that's sort of the beginning, right? That's sort of a whole bunch of things starts to reorient to more of a, as the heart opens, many times I say that the mind starts to become its service to the heart instead of to all of the separate ways of functioning that locks and loads us and kind of repeats over and over. That's not really, it's like a slowing down. And then there's a deeper wisdom that begins to infiltrate, that begins to be recovered, begins to become more of a full spectrum experience. And the mind is really able to interpret more clearly. Not that that's not happening a lot in our lives anyway, right? But like when you wake up in the morning, you're not telling yourself to get up and go to the bathroom, right? Like it's arising, all these very natural things that are arising. But in all the complicated places in our lives, like this sort of natural arising and allowing what's to be recovered to be felt, right? That's sort of the, when I speak about the abiding heart or this movement of opening to what is, right? It's this, it feels like somewhat of like a colliding, I think, for a lot of people. Things is felt very separate, but there's a merging and it's very natural. And then the way we perceive the world and our ideas and things all become very imbued with the heart. And then there is like some natural transformations that begin to happen that bring us into the root of our being and our many people could say our gut or intuition or, we all have those where we know something is true into our bones, all the way into our feet. And like that kind of, that is really our natural way of functioning. And this movement can't be done in the doing. This movement is done in, I say words like bowing or tenderness or gentle, or can this just be here, what you're experiencing right now? Yeah. So how's that landing with you?
Yeah, it brings up a few things for me. I love how you talk about what I hear it as a momentum of life, almost, where things are being orchestrated in our lives and before us, almost as an invitation
Yes.
to get in alignment with a deeper or more heart based sense of ourself.
Mhm.
And the thing that it brings for me is this curiosity of how, I think it's a Byron Katie quote of how life isn't something that's done to you, but done for you.
Yes, yes, yes.
And makes me think that, all the stresses and the challenges and the frustrations that in their own unique way, they all play their part in shaping us to be more refined.
Yes, exactly. It's not exactly as in like an answer, as in like that's like we're speaking clearly, right? We're speaking um in a way that's um where the boundaries fall away and energy can move and aliveness is here, right? Mhm.
The other thing that comes, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The other thing I was going to say was that I imagine for some people watching this, they may really love the sound of what you're saying, but not really understand any of it. And my sense is that that's okay too, because it's really not about the words, so to speak.
Yeah,
But
it's the transmission, right?
yeah,
And the the mystery of like how we come together, right? And so it's for this moment, and who knows, right? And so there doesn't have to be an agenda or condition or story, where you are my beloved, you're my very self, and your suffering is my suffering, and your awakening is my awakening. And so when the question comes, I'm at your feet, because as we use that word awakening, I can't have, there's like a snowflake, right? There's everything is it has this unique, right? So as you share with me your story, and like as you go inside, it's it's the same here. That might not be understood in the mind, but if you have a felt sense of it, like what it really opens us to is that there's the one. And ultimately, we hear that a lot, like we nod and we say, oh, only one, or there's only one. But like this invitation to direct experience, right? This is what life is. This is the invitation inside of life, right? Is not only the ending of the cup alone outside of the ocean, right? And the suffering of that experience, right? But that like when we are opening to what we're feeling being alone, that it we're finding that we could never be separate from the ocean, right? That there was never that possibility, that there's in our own turning and closing of our heart that we're having this experience of separation. But it's really not in the way that we're set up in the world to try to find it out there, when it's already, in the recovery, we our insides becomes infinite, right? Become no longer kind of circling around our wounds and suffering and belief and conditioning, right? That's really, we're creating our own boundaries, and our own energetic boundaries, right? That are bringing us into this isolated experience, right? And so this like opening, right? And it's very simple, because it's only this moment. This is all there is, right? We have this past, present, and future, right, that are very helpful in its service to our moments in life, like getting places and learning new things and um, all these myriad of ways. But do you hear what I'm saying?
Sure.
Mhm.
It seems like my sense is you're talking about the distinction between how things may appear and how things actually are from the lens of our direct experience.
Yes, yes.
And I imagine for somebody listening, when you say something like, "You are my beloved, I'm at your feet," that might be slightly perplexing in the sense that it's not a commonly spoke thing. And in my own experience, it took me quite a while to um, work through the separation thing because what I saw was differences. People look different, people act different. We all have different names, etc.,
Mhm.
etc. And so, on that level, it feels like there clearly is separation, and in the way we function in the world. But my sense is that what you're talking about is quite deeper when we fully come into alignment with this moment.
Yeah,
And you use a beautiful word, softening.
yeah.
Um, all of a sudden, what's left isn't so easy to cut into separation.
So you said so easy to cut into
Well,
separation.
yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's easy, for example, to like being with a group of friends and saying, there's David, there's John, there's Peter, here's me. We all have separate roles. He does this, I do that, he likes that. And so on that level, I feel like, there is separation, or uniqueness is maybe a word that describes that better. But when you're talking about, we're all one, that's clearly at a different level. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And so I invite, and it seems like not only confusing, but maybe like vastly different than the experience that someone that's here watching or how we're speaking about this right now is that, and that is normal, and that the confusion, welcome, right? So it's like this is the movement that starts the softening, right? So like what it is that's really the energy that shows up like the 10,000 veils, right? So like, oh, but I don't experience that. I don't experience what you're saying. So there's that energy, right? Okay, what's inside that I don't, right? There's going to have some qualities of energy that are ready to arise there, right? It's sort of all the unmet, untouched, unconscious, unloved that is coming for you. And it's coming, it's here now, and it's what's going on. And we are sort of through conditioning, we're sort of ready to put a label on it and know something about it, right? And then we're just kind of watching it or looking at it. There's a vast experience of separation there in that kind of functioning. But if we start to like go, okay, my body is feeling this, or there's this, we're starting to open to actually the energy inside of the words that we're saying. And it's really what's creating the phrases anyway. It's what's creating how we're describing everything. But even if this doesn't make sense, you're going to feel this gravity coming in. that's really inviting you to feel what's really going on inside. And each moment is orchestrated just perfectly for the unfolding, the unraveling. You don't have to do anything about it, because even if like, it doesn't even come aware in that moment. If you're listening to these kind of conversations, grace is coming for you, right? And so it's like it's the same way that it happened here, right? Like where I might not recognize it, and then be like, oh, this isn't, it just compounds itself and becomes more intense. Or it's something that pops into our head where we start recognizing, oh, maybe there's another movement here. There's something like that. Is all sort of our mind processing and awakening and sort of unraveling in a way that is creating more and more fertile ground, right? So it's not an easy thing to talk about, the sort of like journey of awakening, right? This unfurling and this movement, right? But you know that's sort of like what we're talking about a little here. Mm-hmm.
I like it when you talk about how, in a sense, everything comes back to this moment, because essentially that's all there is.
Yeah.
And I know people might hear things like that all the time, be in the moment, be here, be now, but actually it feels like the implications of what that actually means are ever deepening.
Yes. Yes, and I don't see there being any ending to that, right? That it's just any, here in this form. Wow, there's a lot of things coming up right now. But in this form, that there is no just it's living mystery. I don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. I don't know what I'm going to do until I do it. Right? Mhm.
I remember once, relates to the point you made before. Uh, I remember once, when I was singing really well when I was a young boy. And I remember as an adult looking back on that experience to try to glean some insight into what was I doing then that was working so well. And the thing that came up for me was I wasn't actually there. There was just singing happening.
Yeah, there's just singing happening.
There
Yes.
was no, there was nothing that I was doing. Um,
Yes.
and it just made me think of the example you gave of sort of no separation,
Yeah.
in a sense where, sure, there was a form there that was unique, doing a very specific activity, but the experience of that was just a movement of energy or a love for that activity. Um,
Yes.
and that just came to mind when I was reflecting on what you were talking about when you were explaining
Yeah.
this.
So grace is, and I use that word, but we could use other words. But that's your true nature. It's arising as a gift to unfold and deepen, like what's happening here, right? It's giving you, a memory, right? But the memory is a happening in this moment, right? There's like it's becoming at service, just showing up just right now, right? To really deepen an inquiry here. I say you're always guided, protected, supported, and loved. I'm like, this is the movement of that. right? This is kind of, you can kind of, feel into that, right? Because it's in separation, as we're in the way we function separation, we maybe think that we went to find that memory. But if you feel into it, that's not how it went, right? It's way prior to your thought. Everything is arising. And it's like it's coming online in our mind, sort of like the cherry on top of the ice cream. Right. And with this kind of just resting here now and feeling into that, how humbling and sacred, and that we slow down enough to really gently open here. Right. And in this moment, is that, is there aliveness? Right? Is your mind tending to what's arising? Right? Not, there's a different quality of our functioning when we're present. And that presence, I also like to say presence is we struggle as humans in this psychological experience of separation, right? But if you look in the world, everything is presence. We could say it's mirroring presence, but it's more intimate than that. So intimate that the intimacy falls away, right? Like when you're walking in the woods, similar to the story that you're talking about with singing, right? So much of like everything that is already present and fully here, this imbued with pure life force, right? Just seeps in, and separation softens and falls away, right?
I'd like to talk to you about contentment.
Mm-hmm.
I my sense from hearing you speak about this pull inwards by love or by grace is where true contentment is found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word contentment is not a word that I use often. It's a beautiful word. I would be curious, like, if we kind of investigate it for a minute,
Mm-hmm.
because if we go inside of contentment,
Mm-hmm.
I like to kind of feel into words and see if there's, like any kind of energy that, like, as we go in, like what's really alive in there. It's so beautiful to see, like more clearly. So contentment, right? Does it have, tell me about the energy of contentment. What you find inside very gently.
It feels like an okayness,
Mm-hmm.
uh, an okayness with how things are. Um, I would describe it maybe as a really grounded sense of yourself that isn't
Mm-hmm.
grasping. Um, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just an
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, I feel that. Um, for me, and the word that, when I have contentment, when I feel into it, and it feels like it can have and it's not that it's a negative word, but something that feels like it may just fall away. Like we can be content, right? But who is content, right? So it's sort of that sort of recognition of being content, right? But then it becomes more simple than that.
Mhm.
Like inside of that, there's something that's even simpler than the Do you sense what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's the challenge with words, because once I've said it, I can feel what a almost an obstacle that is. Uh, it's almost more like an emptiness. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Right.
like yeah, it feels truer. Well, I don't, it's sort of my sense of yeah, just continually being here, um, and you know, uh, maybe just the recognition of that, um, and it just, as opposed to putting your energy outwards, and sort of striving, and that of course happens from time to time, but just this returning, um, to almost the posture of being here.
Yeah. And the word posture is interesting to me too. But what we are like kind of talking here is sort of this sort of where we have the words where we're landing, where we're starting to really where we find that we aren't really that we're that I guess I'm using more of the word the unconditional, right? So it's like kind of any, you know, anything that holds us from away from direct experience, right? Even it gets simpler and simpler still.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And we can feel it, just like what you were saying, you could feel that difference and of contentment and then like, oh well, right, like what's here that's even simpler than that. And then you were describing of being in the bar earlier and with your different friends and then the experience of it being very, different people there and having different experiences. And I think it might be kind of fun to go back and talk a little bit about, you hear the being in the world and not of it, or it's and both, right? So through inquiry and then this opening to what's here and the recovery, that we find when we move into the world or we wake up and we go to our jobs or we go to a bar to meet friends, there's a transformation that happens, right? That maybe, it's hard to describe because it's really it's this direct experience, right? So this like bowing to the inner work or awakening or the path or all these words that we use that really eventually fall away because it it's our natural way of functioning. And as we move more and more into the world opening to what's arising within, then what we did experience as separate, it's like the uncomplicated movements of walking in the forest, this is about embodiment and going into the world. It's we're walking into the same path into the bar, the same path into the job, right? But you can see that you can have the felt sense of the difference of those paths, but really they're the same path. It's just that, like, what we recover and what we would say is these more complicated areas of life, that's what comes for us. So that what remains is not so different from the path in nature, the singing of a song, the right, because our this is our ground of being that is being able to function open to what we're feeling, open to what is going on here, right? So that the truth that remains and our natural organic functioning is alive and free, naturally present, and we know what we need to know when we need to know it. We say what we need to say when we need to say it. We do what we need to do when we need to do it. Becomes the next obvious thing. Like you're walking down the path and you go to pick up a stick. You're in the bar and you go over and pick up napkins, or right, like we are thinking that this can't be a beautiful thing and this can't be the beauty of life, but I invite you in. It seems vastly different, just as much as we say that beliefs, that person over there is so different from us. But this constructs that we have inside is what's creating our vast experience of this and that. And when we embody in our lives, and everything is given to us in our lives just perfectly, everything comes. We either turn away and we repeat, and we re-injure and we suffer. And sometimes there is reprieves, and then our nature is open at any time, because that is a done deal, right? Like we are, whether we are in the experience of it or not, with our psychological constrictions and our heart being guarded and closed, we cannot change the fact that we are all the being of ourself is the same as the tree, is the same as the wind, is the same, we are the same. And so that invitation and the gift is always here in life. And life is always rolling out the red carpet, showing us exactly where to go inside, to heal, to open, tender, gentle, welcome. And it's not that we have to do it. We can't do it. Everything's being worked out and arising, and by some grace and mystery, right? We bow, right? We return, and it is this all very simple. All this we're talking about brings us right here into this moment, the only moment. That's all we've got. There's nothing else but this. Now, here, right? I think it gets very, very simple, and what seems as very complicated, right? We begin to heal in a way where we walk in the world, whatever it looks like, whether it's simple or complicated. We start moving out of the realms of that's good and that's bad. We start being able to see the beauty on the trail, on the beauty with that we open when we see the bird flying. Then we, see when we open to all of our judgments and belief systems that come for us. And there's so many layers of these things. What we open to is like, oh, there's the flower that is beautiful and blooming. There's the flower that is dying, and it is not ugly. It's the beauty becomes the same. The other becomes beautiful in the same sort of way. And there is, whatever that we contract with the can't be, I can't know, that's what's coming for us. And the moment we want to go into our grasping and doing and knowing and all those things, but the moment provides that it can't be any other way. That's all we have. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I think before, when I mentioned about separation and sort of seeing distinction between different people, what I was sharing with was something I used to do whenever I heard people talk about oneness. And that's a term that's quite prevalent in spirituality, where you hear over and over again, we are sort of all one, and whatnot. And I think I, at that time, heard that from the level of mind.
Mhm.
And so I had quite a hard time dealing with that because my mind saw separation, and distinction between myself and a bird, for example, or between
Yeah.
one friend and another. And so, you know, I couldn't uh, understand on that level how there could be oneness, because there was clearly, or things clearly appeared to have uniqueness or separation. Um, but my sense is when things aren't being filtered through that mental process, it becomes less about distinction and, like you said, more about what's arising here, um, which feels a lot. I don't. It feels a lot more like, we talked about mystery, or like just as like a lightness, or a freshness,
Yeah.
that has a capacity uh, to take everything in, but not, cut it like the mind does, this and that and this and that. There's just a kind of a perspective that embodies all.
Yeah. It's so that it's not a problem. I mean, I'm a mom and I'm a wife and I work, right? I'm very in the world, and it's not having to go oh, that's my very self, that's my very self. It's like as we open to our in this way that we're speaking, right? Like that's that there's a natural paradox that it's just not a problem, right? There you are, and here I am. I remember Byron Katie talking about that for a while in a book that I read, saying when she fell out of the like being able to say he or she or you or me. And so if there was a time where it just didn't make sense to say that, but eventually it somehow started making sense to say it, right? It's like it's service to grace, right? To say Alea or neighbor, right? It's very helpful, and it's something that's the mind is not going to be able to fully understand in that context or realm of not including everything. The felt sense of this and that is 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 my very self. This what it's arising is my very self. And then there's not a problem with all the uniqueness of the world, and it leaves us more available, completely available to experience, right? So here I am here in this moment, and I'm appearing as this, right? Like we're in dialogue. This is all that I am right now, right? When I hang this up, I'll probably go walk my dogs, right? So I will be a person walking around. That'll be fully a person putting on my coat, or a dog walker. Then I'm a neighbor, then I'm a car driver, right? That's all that's happening. That's the fullness of the moment. No extra being carried around. No need to make myself something to kind of hold up an identity, right? So with the freedom of that is just as it would be as a tree is only a tree, right? As my dog is, only purely itself, right? Like we get to be so complicated in these ways, but when we're fully open to the moment, then we are and open to what baggage or what is being held, and it takes so much energy, right? There's so much energy to maintain separation. And we become more and more in a felt sense aware of the, our heart being guarded and how much it takes to guard our heart, right? To the reality of the moment just as it is, to just say, no, it's going to look like all these other ways, right? I'm going to add all these other things. And that's not, many of us through conditioning, through culture, me being a man, you being a man, or like the feminine or whatever, all our different ways that we show up, all the different things that we're told, karmically or conditioning through, say, I live here in the South, right? All this stuff, all of these things that have only been around for so long, and they're only constructs that we've created ourselves. This is all things that, not that they can't be at service, but if we land on them in the surface way and make them God, like make them where that's where it's originating from, our reasons or our knowing, without the mystery, like the mystery that imbues it all, the aliveness that it all arises from, right? You can see how we're sort of living a half life, as maybe a way of speaking it.
Yeah, what came up for me there when you were speaking about, and you talked about being in the world and not of it, and showing up in these different roles. It seems like the difference is not identifying with those roles, but being in them and enlivening them. Um, it it just feels like that's the difference. There isn't
Yeah.
this, so this is who I am, and now this is who I am. It's just the natural movement of things in the moment.
Yeah. And if you feel, isn't that just, it's the simplest, the most ordinary, the
Yeah.
most obvious, the
Yeah.
least complicated,
Yeah. Direct.
direct, right? And yeah, like it's the next obvious thing. It's obvious, right? Not any extra. That's the freedom. And then what, and then the recovery is all the things like that where we're functioning and we're starting to is smelling fishy, right? Like we're feeling the difference between the two.
Yeah.
But and in the inquiry, the two, oh, I think I must have had a birthday or something. A fancy iPhone. But it's the right, it's this, I'm using, and we'll see if it happens again. But if it's this, oh my goodness. So putting up my fingers,
Wow. Well,
it's
it was your
it's a
birthday, and
party. We're ending separation and
yeah.
there's a celebration. Right. But it in that it's the ending of the two, right? The space in between no longer becomes space. We found that they were never separate, that there's just all just energy, right? And so as we're opening with tenderness, gentle welcome, softening, here, relax, right? That everything just reorients, recovers, returns, and our mind change reorients the way we're perceiving and thinking. A whole bunch of change just happens from the root of our being, right? From the primordial
Mm.
inside, from the depths. And then whatever we think we know, like, oh, the humbleness of like, oh, I'm 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 experiencing this, or this is becoming available to me. The humbleness is I'm sharing that this is just a beginning. A lot of people want to like hang their hat there and say they know something now. But what I'm saying is this deepening is just so humbling. The direct experience here it seems infinitely just in awe of, like, my mind was feeling this or seeing this, and it was just a fraction of what's to be open to. And there's just this infinite sense. So that brings us never into the teacher, always the student. And if anyone wants to truly be, say, teacher, I'd say trouble, run, because I don't see that as a thing. I see as it's a role as anything else that falls away to the humbleness of what cannot, where I start struggling to speak about, I'm not going to even attempt or try. But that brings us to that, like, I'm bowing at you and you're bowing at me, and we're fools and we're innocent living in the mystery, right? And is this any, and then colliding and collapsing all of the, like that saying of Buddha at the gas pump, and that yes, we are all teachers, and the way we teach is like infinite. And we want to say that we're gonna do it in a way where we can record it and see it and know it, but most of the time, I may be speaking to you now, but most of the time I'm not speaking about non-duality, right? But the sacredness of life, and the the deep knowing that service is happening, whether my mind records it, reads it, or sees it, or hears it from the apparent other's mouth, has no bearing anymore, because the living mystery is, I mean, I'm going to stop talking, but I think you can feel what I'm just feeling, this, what's here right now, what we're speaking about, right?
There's just one final thing I'd like to bring forward, which I
Yeah.
think might kind of bring us full circle in a way. It's been really interesting. I wasn't expecting talk of separation and wholeness and the movements of those things to be a real theme, but I'm really grateful for your clarity on those aspects, and I hope some people can resonate with the different, sides or parts. Something that something that's been significant on my own journey is th- you know the realization that there is still, call it a person or not person or whatever you want, there is still like a heart here that needs to be tended to. And my teacher, Mukti, has said it in a few different ways, which really resonates with me. One saying she had was, to honor your own incarnation. And a second one was, that we may start off unaligned, and then through the process of awakening, we become aligned. And then we go back and get the parts that we left behind.
Mhm.
And that's been really true in my experience. That, whilst there may be no separation, and whilst we may all be one, um, there, there still is a one here that needs love and attention too.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's arising, this yearning, right? Or this, like, this sense. And so, I'm, curious if you would be willing to, Tell me a little bit more about that. And then this, and not maybe not even the word tell, like the energy that's here right now, that's sharing about the heart, that is having a recognition, right? That they're in this movement, this gravity, right? Is pulling inside. Right? It's a very different energy than a doing something energy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if we're to feel the energy in your conversation that you just had.
I would have to use one of your words to describe it. Tenderness.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tenderness is not something that we bring outside of ourselves in, right? Tenderness is something that, like, as you're speaking right now, we can call upon, but it's not really we have to let that go really quick, right? Because tenderness is arising,
Mm-hmm.
tenderness is here,
Mm-hmm.
tenderness is ready, tenderness is serving, right? So we're just kind of falling in to the invitation. And then, right, then that even falls away. We don't need to stay with the invitation, right? Because in direct experience, an invitation is too much, right? So you can feel sort of like this cascading, this falling, this changing of energy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels just like it. Uh, it feels like one's very self coming home to rest.
Yes. Yes. And so, we've spoken all during this, time together or parent time together, right? And, there's been a softening, right? And an opening. And it's bringing us to just the beginning, right? Of the, what I describe as like where the true transformation, right? The true healing, right? Like is really resting, opening. We say the words in the heart, but we can even, that can fall away too. And tenderness everything becomes too much because we become in this moment just opening very simply to what's here. And then the medicine, everything is just, alchemy, uh, separate thing, energies meeting, right? Everything is naturally, organically taken care of in the deepest way. Like this is where when we move out in what appears as the world is separate, this is where in those moments where we took paths similar over and over again, and the unguarded heart and the bowing and all of these words that fall away into much more simple, when we are out in the world, this is where we find how everything changes, because it becomes in the healing, we're not necessarily needing it in the same way externally. When what we are in this movement of inquiry is filling all of those holes, right? As that hungry ghost image through unconditional love right here, right now. Everything, the fullness of everything here in this returning. And then in the world, it stops making so much sense because the need is no longer, the need is changing because it's being healed here from where we have been guarded and managing and turning and grasping and trying and doing, that there's welcome grasping, welcome trying, welcome doing, welcome becoming, welcome everything, all the different flavors that come, and life shows us everything that's unmet, untouched, unloved, unconscious, all flavors, all energetic levels, all highers, all lowers. Like it all ends deep inside with the armor off and running right inside of like what we were saying, no, that's scary, that's terrible. It's the portal home. Inside, that's home. Right? So there's the talking and softening, and then opening, and then maybe then we're ready to really have the tenderness come. And then the deep medicine of what fundamentally changes our lives, brings our heart into the world. Not the conditioned functioning, but the unconditional nature of our being, right? That is not rooted in any perspective or any dynamic that has to stay very small, where we know ourselves in these small ways, or I'm angry and I'm jealous and and then you're just angry and you're just jealousy, or you're just charismatic with need, or all these things. But it's like, oh, you feel, and then that's no longer required. Tender and gentle, because what we're trying to get met, and it's not like we're bad for it, but there's this movement home to recover into this wholeness where our heart abides naturally without any agenda, because it is it's just our natural functioning.
I can feel it.
Yeah, and I know talking today, some of it makes sense and some of it won't. But when we start speaking language of the heart, it's alive, and it's not always. It may be, it's like touching everything. It's when we're speaking with openness, then as we communicate, that's this felt sense of oneness, right? We're not like veiling and holding back. We're not expecting anything to be other than it is. Any catastrophe or person or anything. We were there. I've had a guarded heart. They talk about being compassionate, but like in this open tenderness here, compassion is the same that we see. We don't have to even, like, we awaken to it, like, oh, I said no here. It's not me trying to change you, it's honoring you. And then also the unconditional love here, that's the gift, and how that arises, this mysterious, right? That's how we become at service in the world. And it's in each moment, and we can't know, and it can change tomorrow, right? I say, you know, this, I don't have to teach, right? That's, you know, if I felt like I had to do that, that would feel like a lot of trouble because, or anything, right? Because that's life. Like something, if it's to be, it will keep occurring. I want reality more than anything. That's my beloved. And it's right. It's that's where ego is not, you know, many times you'll hear me say, you know, you get your cookies by, you know, bringing all the outside in, like the Cookie Monster. But even a crumb, we keep a crumb in our pocket. There, you know, we will feel the effects of that, right? Because even a little bit of a veil transforms our experience of presence. And I don't say that as in a should, I say that and find that in your own direct experience. Like as you open to what's here, what remains becomes very loud, you know, we become our discernment and our sensitivity to our energy because the presence that's here, right? You say that it becomes where in separation we are so attuned to living in a way energetically that's disconnected. But as we open up to what's suffering, we are able to feel the immensity of that energy that we are essentially like circling with our guarded heart. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And the immense amount of energy it takes to continue guarding and circling and turning. And it becomes just not more and more, just not worth it at all.
I want to thank you so much, Alaya, for making this time available to me, and for your openness and willingness and for your love.
Mm.
It's been a real joy to get to do this session with you. So thank you.
Ah, well, you're welcome, and thank you so much too, Salwan. I love you. You're my heart, and I'm at your feet,
I
my
love you,
beloved.
Alaya. Thank you.